Case 1. Marybeth Tinning, the Schenectady Deaths. On December 20th, 1985, paramedics were dispatched to 605 Wright Street in Schenectady, New York. 4-month-old Tammy Lynn Tinning was found unresponsive in her crib. For most neighborhoods, a single infant death is tragedy. For police who knew the address, it was déjà vu. 8 Tinning children had already died over the previous 13 years, each ruled a medical mystery. The pattern began in 1972, when 2-week-old Jennifer Tinning died of what doctors called meningitis. Weeks later, 2-year-old Joseph Jr. reportedly suffered a sudden seizure and collapsed in Marybeth's arms. Over the next decade, Barbara, Timothy, Nathan, Mary Frances, Jonathan, and Michael followed, all dying before age 5, each labeled crib death, heart failure, or viral infection. No agency connected the sequence. SIDS was then considered unpredictable, and the couple was treated as unusually unlucky. By 1985, medical examiners were uneasy. When Tammy Lynn's autopsy found no infection, congenital defect, or airway obstruction, the district attorney's office quietly reopened every previous file. Detectives interviewed pediatricians, nurses, and neighbors. One physician admitted he'd suspected smothering years earlier, but lacked proof. Another noted that Marybeth was always alone when a child suddenly stopped breathing. Investigators ordered laboratory comparisons of tissue samples from earlier autopsies and built a timeline covering 13 years of deaths, moves, and funerals. Confronted with inconsistencies, Tinning was brought in for questioning at Schenectady Police Headquarters. After hours of denial, she admitted placing a pillow over Tammy Lynn's face until the baby stopped breathing. She later mentioned harming 2 other children, but withdrew those statements. Her husband, Joe, denied any involvement and was never charged. In 1987, a Schenectady County jury convicted Marybeth Tinning of second-degree murder for Tammy Lynn's death. The judge imposed a sentence of 20 years to life. She served more than 31 years, repeatedly denied parole for lack of remorse, and was finally released in 2018 under community supervision. Case 2. Lacey Spears, the salt poisoning of Garnett Spears. On January 19, 2014, paramedics transported 5-year-old Garnett Spears from his home in Chestnut Ridge, New York, to Nyack Hospital after he began seizing and vomiting. His mother, Lacey Spears, 29, told doctors her son suffered chronic ear and digestive disorders. Within hours, his sodium level climbed to 182 milliequivalents per liter, a concentration rarely seen outside deliberate poisoning. When his condition worsened, he was airlifted to Westchester Medical Center. For years, Lacey had cultivated a devoted online following. She wrote constant posts about Garnett's supposed illnesses, calling him her little prince. Neighbors said she treated hospital trips as routine. Social media records later showed she shared photos of Garnett on feeding tubes alongside captions about his bravery. Hospital staff, however, noticed that Garnett's crises often began when only his mother was present. Detectives obtained surveillance footage from the pediatric intensive care unit. The video showed Lacey carrying Garnett's feeding tube bag into a private bathroom twice within a short window, before his final seizure prior to his death. When nurses tested the leftover fluid, sodium levels were hundreds of times normal concentration. Police searched her apartment and seized canisters of Morton's salt and online logs of searches for dangers of salt in toddlers. Medical experts concluded the only plausible explanation was deliberate poisoning through the feeding tube. Investigators described a classic case of Munchausen by proxy, a caregiver inducing illness to draw attention and sympathy. The Rockland County District Attorney charged Spears with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. Her trial in 2015 drew national media coverage. Prosecutors presented digital evidence, lab reports, and hospital surveillance. The defense claimed there was no direct proof she administered the salt. After 2 weeks of testimony, jurors found her guilty of second-degree murder. The judge imposed a sentence of 20 years to life in Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. Lacey Spears remains incarcerated in New York. Her case is now cited in medical legal training as one of the clearest documented instances of fatal Munchausen by proxy abuse in the United States. Case 3, Awilda Lopez, the murder of Elisa Izquierdo. On November 22, 1995, paramedics were dispatched to a fifth-floor apartment on Henry Street on Manhattan's Lower East Side. 6-year-old Elisa Izquierdo lay unconscious on the floor. Her mother, 29-year-old Awilda Lopez, told responders the child had slipped in the bathroom. Emergency physicians at Gouverneur Hospital quickly ruled out an accident. Elisa had a fractured skull, brain swelling, and internal injuries, consistent with prolonged abuse. Elisa's background was documented in years of family court records. Her father, Gustavo Izquierdo, had gained temporary custody while Awilda underwent drug rehabilitation. After his death in 1994, relatives and teachers repeatedly warned child welfare officials that Elisa's return to her mother's care was unsafe. Reports described beatings, confinement, and verbal humiliation. Despite multiple complaints, the city's Child Welfare Administration restored full custody to Lopez. Teachers at PS 126 noticed Elisa arriving with bruises and flinching at touch. Several filed official abuse reports, noting that Elisa sometimes said, "My mommy hits me." Lopez told caseworkers that Elisa injured herself or fell during play. Investigators later found those explanations were accepted without verification. When police searched the apartment after her death, they found bloodstains, broken toys, and a mattress soaked through the center. The autopsy determined Elisa had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Medical examiners counted dozens of older injuries, including healed fractures and scars. Awilda Lopez was arrested the next morning and charged with second-degree murder and child endangerment. Facing overwhelming evidence, she pled guilty in 1996 to a single count of murder. The judge sentenced her to 15 years to life in Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. She served more than 26 years before being released on parole from Taconic Correctional Facility on April 19, 2022. Public anger over Elisa's death led directly to the passage of Elisa's Law in 1996, expanding access to child abuse records and tightening oversight of protective services in New York State. Case 4, Shirley Winters, Decades of Suspicious Deaths. On November 28, 2006, 23-month-old Ryan Rivers was found unresponsive at his grandparents' home in Pierrepont, St. Lawrence County, while Shirley Winters was visiting. Responders determined he had drowned in a bathtub. The circumstances raised immediate concern because Winters had been connected to multiple child deaths across New York over several decades. Detectives began retracing her history. In July 1979, a cabin fire at Hyde Lake near Teresa killed 2 of her children, Colleen and John. The blaze destroyed most of the structure, and investigators at the time described the cause as accidental, likely electrical. In 1980, 5-month-old Ronald Winters III died in Otisco and was ruled a sudden infant death. Winters had reported finding him unresponsive in his crib. None of the deaths resulted in charges, and the cases went dormant for more than 20 years. With Ryan Rivers drowning under active investigation, prosecutors ordered the earlier cases re-examined. Authorities exhumed remains, reviewed autopsy reports, and reassessed the fire scene evidence using modern standards. As investigators looked deeper, they identified patterns involving Winters' proximity to each death and inconsistencies in her statements. That led St. Lawrence County to present the Rivers case to a grand jury, resulting in a 2007 manslaughter indictment. Onondaga County separately charged Winters in the death of Ronald Winters III after new analysis suggested smothering rather than natural causes. In April 2008, Winters pleaded guilty to manslaughter for Ryan's drowning. She also pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter in the death of Ronald Winters III. Judges imposed a 20-year term for the Rivers case and an 8 to 25-year term for Ronald III, ordered concurrently, with parole eligibility after 17 years. In May 2024, Winters was released from state prison and transferred directly to a secure psychiatric facility under mandated supervision. County officials confirmed the placement and noted that any future community transition would require court approval. Case 5. Lynija Eason, the Bronx Closet Murder. On May 26, 2023, officers from the NYPD's 42nd Precinct responded to a 911 call from an apartment on East 163rd Street in the Morrisania section of the Bronx. 6-year-old Lynija Eason was found unresponsive on the bedroom floor. Her mother, Lynija Eason, 31, claimed the girl had been sick overnight and stopped breathing. EMTs saw fresh bruises, scarring, and signs of prolonged neglect before declaring her dead at the scene. Detectives from the Bronx Homicide Squad secured the apartment and documented what they later called deplorable conditions: trash piles, spoiled food, and clothing stacked over blocked exits. According to court records, Lynija had been forced to sleep in a closet without bedding and was routinely denied food and water. 2 younger siblings were removed immediately and taken to Jacobi Hospital for evaluation. The city's Administration for Children's Services, ACS, had received multiple prior neglect complaints involving the same address. Reports dating back to 2021 cited unsanitary conditions and possible malnourishment, but resulted only in short-term monitoring. Neighbors told police they often heard crying late at night and saw Lynija standing alone in the hallway, whispering that she wasn't allowed to eat. An autopsy revealed extensive bruising to her head, chest, and legs, as well as internal injuries and evidence of starvation. Prosecutors said she weighed just 30 pounds, well below average for her age, and had wounds in varying stages of healing. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide caused by blunt force trauma and neglect. On June 6, 2023, Bronx District Attorney Darcel Clark announced that Lynija Eason had been charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter, and criminally negligent homicide. In April 2024, a Bronx County grand jury formally indicted her on all counts. Court documents allege she locked Lynija in a closet for long stretches and withheld food as punishment. Eason pled not guilty at her arraignment and remains held without bail at Rikers Island. Her case is still pending in Bronx Supreme Court. Both surviving children remain in foster care under state supervision, while ACS faces renewed scrutiny over how repeated warnings failed to prevent another fatal abuse case in the city. Case 6. Keri Mazzuca, the Baby Moses case. On October 9, 1997, highway workers discovered a newborn's body wrapped in a plastic bag near a bridge along River Road in Colony, New York. The infant boy had been left at the edge of the Mohawk River, a few miles north of Albany. Investigators estimated he had been alive for only minutes before suffocating. With no missing child reports that fit, detectives called him Baby Moses, a name chosen by a local pastor who later held a memorial service. The body was buried under that name in Colony's Memory Garden Cemetery. State police and the Colony Police Department followed every lead: hospital birth logs, reports of concealed pregnancies, and tips about young women who had recently given birth. None produced results. DNA preservation was limited in the late 1990s, and with no match, the case went cold. Over the next 2 decades, detectives periodically re-examined the evidence whenever technology advanced, but the infant's identity remained unknown. In 2021, the New York State Police Forensic Investigation Center retested biological material collected from the scene. Analysts successfully built a DNA profile and entered it into the national database. In 2022, the sample was uploaded to a public genealogy system, where distant familial matches pointed to the Schenectady area. Working with genealogical experts, investigators built a family tree that narrowed the focus to the Mazzuca family. Detectives interviewed 44-year-old Keri S. Mazzuca, who initially denied any knowledge of the case. When confronted with the DNA results, she admitted she had secretly given birth as a teenager, panicked, and placed the newborn in a plastic bag before leaving him near the bridge. She told investigators no one else knew she had been pregnant. In March 2024, prosecutors charged Mazzuca with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. Facing overwhelming genetic evidence, she entered a plea agreement in early 2025, admitting to first-degree manslaughter. In May 2025, a Schenectady County judge sentenced her to 8 to 25 years in state prison. The identification of baby Moses ended one of New York's longest-running infant homicide mysteries. Investigators credited forensic genealogy, linking modern DNA profiles to decades-old evidence, for solving the case. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe for more true stories from Dewey Tells It.